this is
She's gonna get her.
this is from headquarters.
She's got one.
So
It's from Ed Robinson, it wasn't.
He said they should, yeah, but he said something to me when he handed it to me. We were
Oh, yeah, no, it was, we sent it too late for it to be on the agenda.
Oh, okay.
That was. That was killer. That was worse.
all set? We call the May 14, 2015 meeting of the Foster Village Order. Please rise for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, announcements. I have an email from the Secretary of State's open meeting website indicating that this meeting was posted on that website on May 12th at 5:47 p.m. So we are in compliance with the Open Meetings Act. The next announcement I'd like to make is we've been notified of the passing of two residents, one current, one former resident at the time. Marshall Spaulding and Bill Jones. Marshall Spaulding was the sexton for the cemeteries in Foster. He spent a lot of time researching the cemeteries, specifically the veterans who were interred within the town of Foster, created a database of that. And Bill Jones, who was a long-term resident on the library board and has just the past few years retired down to Florida. Both of those gentlemen have recently passed, and I'd like to have a moment of silence in their honor. One last announcement. You may know that tomorrow the flags in the town will all be at half-mast through a proclamation by President Obama. He declared the 15th of May this year, and I believe all years going forward, to be Peace Officers Memorial Day in the middle of Police Week to recognize peace officers who have lost their lives in the line of duty. So the flags in the town will be at half-mast in relation to that tomorrow. The next item on the agenda is public comment. So public comment is a opportunity for folks in the room to speak about things that are not on the council agenda. If there's something that you wish to speak about that is on the council agenda this evening, we will recognize you and allow you to speak at that time. I'll go through the names, and if you have something to speak about that is not on the agenda this evening, we'd love to hear from you. If it is on the agenda, then we'll ask you to hold your comments until a little later. So the first individual on the list is Chief Zio.
I just want to thank and explain, recently we had a major accident on Route 6, and during that accident, Route 6 was closed down, propane truck, 3 vehicles. We also had a police operation going on that day. Both the accident and the police operation, took Rhode Island State Police, all of Foster Police, and Situate Police to handle both those accidents and the operation. During that accident, and the only reason I'm saying it tonight is because it got back to me that a couple people in town complained. During that accident, I requested the highway assist Foster Center at 6 and 94 to shut down the road. Foster Center was only able to send 1 vehicle and 1 person, so I requested, asked the highway department to send a truck up there to assist with traffic, and they did it. And it's got back to me that people complain, why isn't the police there instead of highway? Because the police weren't able to be there because of the accident and police operation going on that day. So again, I just want to explain to the council, what went on that day and why highway was blocking on road.
Mr. Bruce Campbell?
I can wait until the item comes up on the agenda.
Okay, very good. Mr. Joe Carey?
Yes, I guess my item is on the agenda, but it's an executive session.
It's an executive session.
Yes, and I was just curious why the Providence Board of Supply Board of Agent is still in executive session. We already had it at the town financial meeting.
Okay, I can give you a quick answer. I'll defer to the solicitor if my answer isn't complete or not. The financial town meeting approved paying back the monies. What's on the agenda this evening is actual signing of the contract. So the contract is not just a payment schedule. There are other clauses in it that the council has to be certain are all correct. So it's essentially still in the contract negotiation phase, and that's why it's in the executive session.
I was just curious because it was approved as a payment. I didn't know if it was already set. Thank you.
Mr. Dennis Terry?
I'm going to pass it this time. Thank you.
Okay, so that is everyone who has signed up, and we are going to now address minutes. April 9th minutes.
I make a motion that we accept April 9, 2015 minutes as presented.
Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion carries unanimously. April 23rd minutes.
I make a motion that we accept the April 23rd, 2015 minutes as presented.
Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Warrants, payroll warrant number 42.
I make a motion that we accept payroll warrant number 42 in the amount of $26,850.86.
Discussion on the warrant? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion carries unanimously. Payroll warrant number 43.
I make a motion that we accept payroll warrant number 43 in the amount of $27,200.97.
Discussion on the warrant? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion carries unanimously. Payroll warrant number 44.
I make a motion that we accept payroll warrant number 44 in the amount of $29,070.07.
Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion carries unanimously. General warrant number 20.
I make a motion that we accept general warrant number 20 in the amount of $152,578.63.
Made and seconded, is there discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion carries unanimously. Moving on to old business. The first item in old business is an update on the building and zoning official position. So, for the audience, just to let everyone know, it might be wondering why the position is not filled. At this point, we've only received one applicant that is certified by the state to take the position. We have had direct marketing, mailing out to everyone who is certified in the state. We received a list of those folks from the state building official's office. And we are getting an updated list. There is, and maybe a few people on the updated list. Kelly also has some information for us on this position.
The information we discussed earlier about the number of hours.
Yes.
My concern is that there's nobody to go to when I get a bill, so who's going to approve it, because we really don't know how it's working out. The first bill I got was for a month, and it was for $420, this is for Peter. The exiting building and zoning. The next one was for 3 weeks, and it was for 700, which was still somewhat reasonable and acceptable. And then the next bill was for 1,050, and it was for 2 weeks. So basically, that's still less than what we would be paying him if he worked here for his full 20 hours. Not significantly less. And the last bill we got was for 630 that we received for this week. And it was for last week's time, it was for a period of 5 days. So my concern is that, yes, we would expect it to increase because it's nicer weather, there's more buildings. But as this position goes unfilled, I don't know how to really respond to these bills. And we're paying him through our system, as we always have, through payroll, which is acceptable from the IRS standards. It's just that I just want everybody to be aware this is what we're paying him, and I didn't know when this was going to end. I was concerned that it's actually, this week was more than he would have made if he worked for us full time, which is his full schedule, which is actually part-time at 20 hours. So I just wanted everybody to be aware that this is happening. Zoning still isn't being addressed, any zoning violation, so it's really just handling the building portion. And I thought somebody should maybe discuss with him the way the bills were being prepared, possible future billing, for a possible discussion on how we bill in the future, maybe by the quarter hour. Right now it seems it's like an hour or 2 hours. There's no hour, quarter, hour and a half, things like that. So it's either an hour or 2 hours. So I don't think that I have any authority to do so, so I wanted some sort of action to either say, you want the bills to go in front of the council, you want somebody to address this, so when he bills that they're going to approve it, somebody to review it, somebody to say, I can tell you on one finger what I know about building and zoning. So I shouldn't be the person to approve that bill. I don't know how you want to address it.
John, can I ask, you said there's no zoning, because I did work with him 2 or 3 days, calling
Okay.
back and forth, and I think he went out to a certain one that he had been working on with the
Okay.
bank.
So maybe there are some,
But it might be recent enough to not be there, I don't know, but he has gone back and forth with me on some zoning
Maybe.
violations.
be here just, as I said, not specifically noted as a zoning issue. And I don't know enough about it.
It wasn't more than 3 phone calls and.
Well, that would have been, the conversation I had with you was 2 hours on one day and another hour another day. Bill, I am not in a position to say yes or no, either way. And at first, it all seemed reasonable, but now as we're progressing, it's starting to get a little bit less reasonable, and I think it's some oversight.
So there are a couple of different issues. One is oversight for this temporary situation. The second issue is finding a permanent solution. So, let me ask Jane, have you heard anything back from the state building office about that updated list that we requested?
I spoke to Jack Layden yesterday, and he told me that they were currently going through a certification process. I don't know if this is an annual process of recertification and new certifications, and they would not have an updated list until sometime in June, but it sounded like it would be toward the end of June, and he would get it to us as soon as he had it. He did also say he had some sort of a meeting to go to next week, and he would reach out to some retired zoning officials, but he also cautioned that a lot of the newly retired building and zoning officials were only allowed with the Social Security to work maybe a minimal number of hours annually, so he wasn't going to offer a lot of hope, but he said he would try to reach out and see if he could come up with somebody who could help us.
Anyone on the council have any questions, concerns, or ideas?
I do. I think it would be hopefully to our benefit to reach out to some of our neighboring communities, see if we could share a building official with one of them, maybe Gloucester, if it's a part-time building and zoning official. See if there might be an opportunity for both towns to save some money there. And
Did we send that letter initially to us?
Yes, in fact, I spoke to their new inspector who, maybe something's changed in the last few months, but currently, or when I did speak to him, he was not certified yet to sign off on certain things, and he was only working part-time for them, yes, but I don't know what their arrangements were at the time for signing off on certain things. Maybe he's gotten that certification at this point, or maybe he's one of those that Jacqueline referenced, that's going to be going through the certification process this month. So we can, you know, we can certainly talk to him again.
In Coventry?
Yeah, just
make a mention
of Coventry.
Like, call.
John, one other thing, I was
Yes,
just
go ahead.
thinking, when we were doing the bridges, we didn't have any bridge inspectors. So I met up with someone in state purchasing who told me that they have inspectors, for that purpose anyway, that we can kind of use on a case-by-case basis. I don't know, maybe they have building and zoning people too. I don't know that. They had building inspectors that we could have used if we needed to call somebody, you know, once or twice or something like that. So maybe I can call back that same contact and see if they have building zoning people on the state level.
Why don't we do all of those things, you know, the state, Coventry, Gloucester, you know, maybe let's with Jacqueline and reach out every avenue that we can think and see if we can find any options.
How do we want to address Peter?
That's the next thing, how do we want to address the oversight of the bills and the hours of work? Does anyone have an idea?
When we authorized that initially, was there a, did we specify anything?
No, we did not specify like a maximum number of hours or a maximum wage we did. And good.
Is it currently an hourly rate?
He's charging $35 an hour, but it seems to be rounded to the nearest hour, so, because it's all hours, there's no half hours, there's no.
Would it be appropriate to develop a contract with Peter stating that it's a quarter hour or a half hour increments, and that it's not rounded up to the hour? That it's only allotted so many hours per week. I mean, I don't know how much is entailed. It seems like, I don't know, does he submit how many hours he's doing the work, or is it?
He mentioned to me that he drew the $35, I do remember him saying that, drew the $35 an hour from the new person. Well, we never hired that new person, who said they were going to charge us. Well, that's not true. He said this. Okay.
How do we typically administer the town hall? Do we do it on a half hour?
Well, somebody works, we round to the next quarter hour. When I was an auditor, I rounded to the next quarter hour. Lawyers round to the next.
Not a quarter hour.
Yeah.
The thing that disturbed me is it doesn't have any 11 to 11:45. He works from 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. There's no hourly documentation. It just says 2 hours, but there doesn't seem to be any accounting when that would be, and don't we require that of everybody else?
I don't know what you want to require for somebody who's working full-time somewhere else and virtually doing you a favor, so to speak.
Right.
So that's where it gets tricky, and I'm totally out of my comfort zone with this. I don't feel comfortable.
Mr. Savassi?
Yeah, two things. You got an applicant, have you interviewed him? Second of all, the guy left because he felt you insulted him a couple of times, and I'd be very careful to insult him this time and question his integrity, and then you have nobody. Okay, that leaves Denise doing building inspection. There you go.
You have such faith in me, Ron.
I do. I know you can do it, Denise. So I think you should just pay the bills you're getting and try like hell to end this thing.
Any other comments? Okay, and let's just reach out to those different avenues that we indicated, and we'll see how that goes, and we'll revisit it. Or something else?
And pay the bills as they come in. I just wanted you to be aware that now it's starting to be more than what we would actually pay him per week if he was working. So I wasn't comfortable with that. You're fine with that, as long as I had double pay for it.
We put them on the warrant.
No, he's not paid through payroll. They're on the payroll warrant, but they're already paid.
Does anybody wish to change the way it's happening? Kelly's paying it as they come in, alternate?
I could forward someone an email.
I did notice that his first bill, he said how many hours he spent. It says there a total of X hours. The next three do not say how many hours, it just has dates and what he's charging. I think we have a right to know how many hours they're paying him for. I guess we could figure out, take that amount and divide it by 35.
It was an easy calculation, yeah.
But still,
And like I said, I'm not questioning his integrity. Normally I sign off on all of the payroll. I have no knowledge, and as it's now growing to be a greater amount than what we're paying if he was working here, I don't feel like I have the authority to authorize that, so.
Okay, so let me just suggest any interim. Let me just suggest any interim, if you could just ask him to bolster his documentation a little bit more. Go ahead and pay them as they come in, and we'll review it in 2 weeks, we'll see what we have. Does anybody disagree with that, just to talk further?
no.
Did you get that? Okay, thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the tax relief ordinance subsequent to the resolution 2015-04.
I'll be recusing myself on this, like I did last time.
Okay. So does he have the form? Okay, so subsequent to the council's discussion, perhaps a month ago regarding the tax resolution, tax relief ordinance resolution, there seems to be some confusion in the town as to what the intent of the council was, the intent of the folks who put it forward and voted for it. So I want to assure everyone who is here, and everyone who's watching, everyone who I speak with, that there is no intention of myself or the folks I know on this council to take the tax freeze away from anyone who's currently on the freeze. Those folks will all be grandfathered. Anyone who tells you otherwise doesn't know what they're talking about, because that's not our intention and has never been. That being said, we do have some issues that have been raised by our financial folks, and we'll let them chime in a moment, that the ordinance as it's currently constructed is not sustainable in the long term, and that if we don't do anything to address the long-term sustainability, we run the risk that the town is going to hit a financial wall, as we did with the motor vehicle excise tax, and as we did with the Providence Water Board, and as we imminently will when the state pension lawsuit comes down. We doubt they're going to be handing us money, they're going to be taking money from us. And if we don't address it before the town hits a wall, that ordinance is at risk for everyone to lose it, because the town won't be able to sustain it. So I just want to assure everyone that it's not the intention to remove it from anyone who has it, but to make sure there's long-term sustainability going forward. So that's speaking for myself. I'll let the other folks speak for themselves before we recognize our financial folks.
Well, I got 4 pages at home, that size, of calls for people that figure they're gonna lose their tax freeze or something else. And the first thing I told them was, well, if you got anybody on that council that would be thinking of you, it'd have to be me, because I'm 85 years old. And I'm certainly not going to vote against taking away the freeze from anyone that has it legitimately. And then I went on to tell them that I give them my word. I would not vote to take away from anyone if we do anything. The people that are on there legitimately can be grandfathered in, and we'll work from there, because we do have to look it over. I mean, this year alone is what, 30 people went on and 8 went off, right? And if that keeps up, there's only about 1,500 homes.
35
are going on.
How many?
35 and not.
All right, so we got 1,500 homes paying the bill, but no industry whatsoever. The point is, if we keep going, we've already got 300 or 400 homes at tax freeze. If we keep going at that rate, we'll be in big trouble. So I think it's worth studying, worth looking into. But as John said, and I promised every one of those people that I showed 4 pages of that in the first week alone. And I got another one home on Monday. That I will not ever take away the tax freeze. But there are things that can be done and should be done to correct some of the wrongs that are there now. That's how I feel.
Well, I guess just to echo that as well, there was no situation where I would support taking away the tax freeze from anybody who's currently on it. There's, as I mentioned at the April 9th meeting, I do think we have a moral obligation to the people who plan their retirement based on the assurance that their taxes will not increase, to honor that pledge and honor that promise that was made to them. However, I do think that a candid conversation will look at ways to potentially modify it for people going forward is necessary. In that conversation, I think needs to focus on how to ensure that the tax freeze remains around for the people who need it, for as many people as possible, so that we don't hit the point where it becomes threatening for everybody, in exchange for keeping it as is, which I think, as presently written, if we continue with the ordinance without any modifications, I think we could reach a situation where people who do need it are forced off of it in exchange for keeping more people on it than necessarily need it. And I think that the intention of having that conversation, a protracted conversation with a good deal of process that goes into it, is something that does need to happen.
Okay, so, financial folks. Oh, who else?
Thank you. Thank you,
Okay,
Kelly.
I didn't see.
As you know, I voted against it. I feel that we have something in place and we need to look at that. I would like to know who's going to determine who can afford it, who deserves it, who doesn't deserve it. Does that change from council to council?
Is that a question?
Oh yeah, that's a question. Has there been a study done to say that we can't sustain this? How do we know we can't sustain it?
Well, let's hear the financials, but, as far as is it gonna change from council to council? Absolutely. As everyone knows, a tax freeze law is approved as an ordinance locally, then it goes to the State House and they enact it as state law. Well, the intention is to go through the process, to revise it in a way that is appropriate and worked out through the conversation. And there are a number of different ways. One thing that we could certainly consider is a residency requirement. So people moving to town when they're 65, they don't immediately get a tax freeze on the day they move into town.
They don't. They have to live here for a year.
A year isn't really a residency requirement.
But there is a residency requirement in place now.
It's inadequate if you ask me.
Well,
So from year to year, is it going to change from the council? On the whim of the council? No. What's going to happen is the council is going to pass an ordinance, it will be enacted as state law, and then that's it. It will be just as concrete, just as firm as the current one is. There will be no difference.
Perhaps I read that resolution wrong.
Perhaps you interpreted that resolution.
Perhaps
Yes,
I did.
I would give you that.
Are we going to address at some point the letter that's in our packet?
Mr. Chippendale's letter?
Yes.
Well, that's why it's here. In fact, Mr. Chippendale,
I just didn't know whether you want to address it next, or if you're
well,
just...
it's part of the conversation. You know, Mr. Chippendale sent us a letter in response to this resolution, saying that he wasn't gonna submit it to the State House because he thought it was loose, and that's fine, so it's not gonna go forward, there's not a problem. But we believed at the time, since it is state law, since our tax relief ordinance is state law, that we couldn't just change it. We can't just change it, we have to get state approval to change it. And what Mr. Chippendale has indicated is, well, no, we didn't really need to ask for permission, we can go ahead and do it, and his words, prepare a proposed change to the tax freeze, the town's tax freeze policy, and then submit that. So to go through the process locally, with input, with the conversation, answering your questions and our concerns and the financial issues, and then put forward that newly formulated ordinance to be enacted. So it's not going to be open to the whims of council to council to council.
So if you read Mr. Chippendale's letter, and in his third paragraph where he says, it is clear that this legislation would eliminate the necessity for the General Assembly to approve any further specific taxation policy changes in the town of Forster. Would you say that he misinterpreted the resolution also?
He misinterpreted our intent,
He misinterpreted yours. Okay.
I would say.
May I ask another question? I
Okay.
did go into town hall after receiving this, and I was looking for, in Mr. Chippendale's letter, he references a 2011 proposal to modify the elderly tax freeze. Jane and I could not, well, Jane could not find it. I don't know, I know you were not on the council at that time. I don't know if you know what that is in particular that he's referencing? Or do we have somebody from that council present that might be able to identify that?
Well, let's look. Tax
I
assessment.
can't acknowledge it.
Past council person, tell me if I'm wrong because you're on the council now. A past council person had sent forward to Mike Chippendale some kind of a revision to the tax freeze. It never came to town hall. I was asked for numbers, I was asked for information, which I had forwarded to that person, and that was done. She did that, she wrote something up on her own, and she forwarded right to Mike Chippendale. It never came into town hall. That's why you can't find it, that's right. And she did that, it was too late anyway, but it wasn't,
It didn't progress through the system.
yeah, it didn't progress the right way.
Actually, I would like to hear from our
That's
financial
right.
folks first, and then we'll get all the information on the table and we can.
Was she done? I'm sorry.
Yes, thank you.
This came also, I'm sorry, this came up about 6 years ago when I first got here. The current assessor at the time indicated that there were two major problems, one being Providence Water and the other being the tax. She saw that this was going to be an ongoing problem or concern several years from now. We didn't really address either because we couldn't, for one reason or another at the time. Patty came in and she saw the same issue. And basically, if you look at the last 5 years, each year we have about two-thirds as many people going on as the number of people coming off. And now we have at least 25% of our homes are frozen. So just from that standpoint, that is somewhat of a concern. The other concern is the way the ordinance is written and the way that it's being applied, which is really primarily the way the ordinance is written, is that I think there's an assumption that everybody is benefiting from this. If you look at the actual list, which we do have available, you both have requested it and you've both seen it, Denise and John, there are several people on the list who very, very well could be in extreme need and are not receiving any benefit from this at all. Because what people don't understand is when you go on the tax freeze, your assessment is frozen and so is your rate. If you happen to go on when the market is high, your assessment is frozen high and a high value. If they were to, their assessment could very well be $75,000, $80,000 less today than it was then, except that their rate was lower. They could probably go on, some of those people, if you saw on that list, had a zero benefit. And a lot of the reason is because the value of their home today at the new rate would be very equivalent to what they went on the freeze, what they were receiving at the freeze level, frozen level, 10 years ago. So is that really accomplishing what your goal was? And that was a part of my question. You have a goal, and that was to preserve the elderly's their homes and to keep them in foster, and to, that was always expressed to me as your goal. And in that way, those people are falling through the cracks. It is not, they're not benefiting. So in some ways, a restructuring is to help all people on the freeze. You have a decent number of people who are receiving no benefit. It takes years to be on the freeze for some people to receive a benefit. So you could restructure it. We asked that it be brought up so that people would actually look at it, instead of just know that it exists, to actually really look at it, see how it's applied, see how each citizen is being treated, see how it affects each person. Seriously, I can't really off the top of my head without saying, there's a whole column of people who are receiving no benefit. And there's some people who are receiving significant benefit because they went in when the property was very low. So it's really more of a request to review and to say that this is going to be a future problem. I understand that everybody wants to keep the elderly in their homes, but do you want to put a burden on your future citizen, on the citizens who are going through school right now? If you're raising a family here, you don't want to limit their ability to buy a home here when they're older enough to do so. So if you price them out of the market by increasing their tax rate at a point where you're decreasing the marketability of your home because your tax rate is no longer comparable statewide for the benefits that you offer, I don't know if that was your intention either. I'm just trying to make people aware of all the circumstances so that you're consciously making a decision what you're doing, instead of just simply saying, hey, we have an elderly and disabled tax freeze, and you're just expecting that everybody who needs it is getting some benefit. And there are several people on that list who probably need it and are not getting any benefit at all. And it's just not benefiting the people that I think you intended. And also because now we're at the 25-75 rate, we have 25% of the people who own homes are pretty much on a freeze. If this continues to grow, 30 on, 10 off, 30 on, and 5 people off, eventually you're going to put have such a large tax rate that when people, I get that you don't want them to move, I understand all that. But the point is, when people go to sell, they want to be able to sell their homes. They want to be able to have a tax rate that they can say, okay, is not going to prohibit the sale of their home. And again, you don't want to do what Social Security has done, which is basically resulting in 20-year-olds paying for 40 years into a system that they will never even receive the principal balance of what they paid into. And you want your children to be able to buy a home here. You want all those things. So I just want you to look at it, really, not just with me, but with other financial people, compare it to other states, literally see who's benefiting, who's not. And I guarantee you, there's dozens and dozens of people on the list with a zero benefit. Maybe there's a way to restructure it so that everybody has a benefit on it. Everybody's receiving a benefit at the age of 65, not just, people who happen to turn 65 when the market was low, or vice versa. There's things that are problematic with the policy and it really should be looked at. And if you still decide to go with that, then that's fine, but at least you've had a comprehensive 2015 look at something that was adopted, 30 years ago or more?
1974.
So it's a different time, and I'll have to look at it again, make sure it's serving the purposes that it was designed for, and go from there.
Okay.
Okay, Kelly talked to the numbers part of it. I'm going to speak to the problems within the ordinance that I found. The council has asked me many times how I'm policing this, if I'm checking all the applications that come in, and is everything correct on them. The disabilities, what do I do for that? We have the doctor sign it. I've asked for the doctor to notarize it. Most doctors don't have a notary in their office. So I continue to ask anybody that's on a disability to send me a copy of the award letter from Social Security. I tell them, block out what you're getting for the, for a payment. I don't care what that says. There's a number on that letter. I can tell by that number that you're 100% disabled, which is what the ordinance says. Now, the biggest problem with disability, this ordinance and the disability, there's a line here that says, evidence of such disability must be established by a certificate of a physician licensed to practice medicine in this state. I have people, because we are verifying doctor's signatures right now on the disability, so that no one can say there was fraud committed. But I have people that are disabled, that their doctors are in Boston, they're in Massachusetts, and some in Connecticut. Am I supposed to take them off because this ordinance says in this state? These are things that need to be fixed. I cannot tell someone what doctor to go to. You can't come on the freeze because you don't go to a doctor in Rhode Island. And those doctors are not certified in the state. One of the doctors that signed one of those papers used to be certified in Rhode Island, gave up the Rhode Island license and is just certified in Massachusetts. Didn't want to pay the $1,000 a year for the certification for that piece of paper in Rhode Island. So he left Rhode Island, he's in Massachusetts. Am I supposed to tell that taxpayer, I have to take your tax freeze away because the ordinance says in this state, certified in the state of Rhode Island? How do I do that?
You have to fix it.
It has to be fixed, but as of right now, the way it is, technically, I'm supposed to tell that taxpayer, you're no longer on the tax freeze until you get a doctor in the state of Rhode Island. And he's been going to that doctor, because the doctor himself called us, and the doctor says he's been treating this person for many, many, many years. He just happened to move to Massachusetts, and the patient followed him. So I have to take these applications now that I have anybody that was signed by Boston, Connecticut, Massachusetts, and I have to tell them, your freeze is gone. You're going back up to full rate.
I don't think that's the intention
No one
of the
told you
ordinance.
to do that. No.
Please?
We spent 3.5 hours going over the statute, but no one told you to do that kind of drastic cut.
But we
think
basically
you need to go to the
specifically
intent.
said certified in the
Correct, that's what it
state.
says, but you need to go to the intent of the statute. And in 1974,
You're saying one thing and.
no, because we talked about statutory construction. You didn't bring that particular example up to me that time.
You pointed this out to me.
Yeah, absolutely, but you didn't bring an example up where somebody is
Until I
supposed to be
went and
knocked
started
off.
verifying the signatures.
But I don't think anybody intends you to do that. We came up with a lot of different issues that need clarification, but I don't think anyone intends you to knock someone off that's been there. I think what we discussed is the construction of a particular statute. So if you have an issue like that, because it's outgrown, the days, the time, the practice has outgrown this 1974 statute, we go to intent. And the intent is to make sure that it's truly disabled, that a medical doctor says so. We even discussed, maybe it's not a medical doctor anymore, maybe it's a specialist, maybe it's not an MD, maybe it's a totally different kind of doctor because now everybody's specialized, right? But I don't think the intent was to knock anybody off or have you knock them off.
And I agree, I don't think that may be the way it reads, but that's not the intention. But it's an example of why the ordinance needs to be addressed and revised to make it current. Keep it currency that now it's 40 years old and these issues crop up. 40 years ago, maybe people didn't have doctors in Boston. They all went locally, they all went to Dr. Spencer, they all went to somebody right up the road here, but now times are different, times have changed. So, I don't believe we should take any of those folks off, but rather in our conversation for how it should be revised to address it so that's no longer a problem.
I think the purpose was always to have a deliberate and thoughtful discussion of the problems with the existing ordinance as well as how we can do things better going forward. We have the benefit of, I think, every community I've looked at in the state has their own version of some sort of relief. We have the benefit of seeing what's been done in other communities, how it's worked there, and hopefully coming up with something that works for us. But it is going to be a process. It's going to take a decent amount of time and hopefully a lot of input from people who have experience under the existing ordinance as well as the people who would be impacted by any changes going forward.
Well, if you're going to really look at this, like I've been asking for a while, that someone we have to look at this and it has to be updated, it needs to be tightened up, there's too many loose ends in this ordinance. But I would like it next time that you talk to me before you present a resolution. Because that resolution, I got blindsided by that. And I'm getting a big brunt from it. A lot of people are blaming me for that, and I had nothing to do with it. And I'm not happy about that. My reputation is not going to get ruined for this. I've got a good reputation with everyone in the state as far as what I do and who I work with and all different things in the Assessors Association. And this town, with something like that, I got blindsided and I wasn't happy about that. I asked and asked for someone to come and talk to me, and you too, John. I've asked you to talk to me, talk to Kelly, talk to me. Let's look at the numbers, let's look at the ordinance line by line, and let's see what is wrong and what isn't wrong. And that wasn't done.
Right, that resolution just was to open the door.
But that wasn't,
It didn't
didn't need to
actually,
be done because of the council, all the council needs to do, and I know this, by law, all you need to do is write an ordinance, tighten up the ordinance, do what you want to do to change and to tighten this up, and send it right to the General Assembly for their approval. A resolution like what that was written, that got too many people in this town up in arms about, because they all think they're going to lose everything, was not necessary. That didn't even have to happen.
We know that now.
Well, if somebody talked to me, I would have told them,
There you go.
but nobody did.
So, some folks have their hands up, and I'm gonna go, hopefully in the order that I saw them, and Mr. Campbell was first.
Okay. I want to address Mr. Chippendale and Mr. Kettle's reluctance to put this general law in, or the resolution in to make it a general law. This particular resolution, we haven't really talked about the specifics of it, but this particular resolution completely does away with the ordinance capabilities that were in the general law before, and gives this council and every subsequent council complete discretion. I mean, it says it right, line by line by line. It's complete discretion of the sitting council. So every single sitting council can come along and put whatever they want into an ordinance. They're not restricted at all. And it's just much too lenient and gives the council much too much power, and it would take away the security and the stability of the tax freeze going forward. It's impossible to say by that resolution that it's grandfathered. It may be grandfathered by you people, but it won't be grandfathered by the next council, or the next council, or the next council. Every single council has the discretion to change the ordinance according to that resolution. Is that correct, Mr. Stevens?
the,
You have the resolution?
I'd rather you speak to what you wrote, not what your intent was.
the resolution,
Down at the bottom, the last 8 lines, it just spells it all out, where everything is at the discretion of the council.
I think that there's still a great deal of procedure that would need to be followed that would take it outside of just the council's discretion, between public hearings and I believe even financial town meeting approval.
No, it doesn't say that.
No, the resolution doesn't say that, but there are other laws that would impact what the council can and cannot do.
It's just passing an ordinance. I mean, that's what you do now, is you pass an ordinance. And to pass an ordinance, you hold a public hearing, and then you make a decision. And it doesn't have to go before a financial town meeting.
I believe in the charter, if it has to do with levy tax, it would
Well,
have to be.
whatever, the way that reads, it gives complete discretion of the town council.
So we know it's not going forward. You've heard our intent. I think that your fears are hopefully are alleviated. You know what we expect to do. You know that we will be engaging the public in the conversation. Everyone that I've spoken to, I've told them we are open to all suggestions. We think that this should be tightened up, this should be loosened up, here's a possibility.
Oh, I agree that the administration can be massaged. Now, to the point of the taxes, the elderly tax freeze becoming a financial town burden, if everybody in this town was over 65 and had a tax freeze, our taxes would go down dramatically because we wouldn't have a school. And 60% of the budget is for the schools. And the demographics of the town have been gradually shifting. I've been involved in politics here for 45 years, and the demographics have been gradually shifting to an older set. And the percentage that goes to the school has been inching down, inching down, inching down, so it's now around 60%, where it was, well, like 2/3, 10, 15 years ago. So that the amount that goes to the schools, because there are more elderly people, is decreasing. So,
I would say that that's a hypothesis, Mr. Campbell, but I know the number of grandparents in this town, over 65, who have their children and grandchildren living with them. So if it was forbidden for any school-aged children to be living in a home that's on a tax freeze, then your proposition would be.
well, I guess my point is, if the elderly left and they were replaced by school-age families, then the school population would go up. Thank you.
I saw Mrs. Ryder next.
I attended that meeting where this was brought forward, and having attended it, I left, because a lot of questions were asked, and I left with the feeling, or actually being told, that this was the first step in a process, and this was so that a conversation could be had about tweaking it. Now, I don't know, if you have to have permission from the state to even talk about it, or you just do it and then pass it to the state and they decide. I don't know, but my impression that evening was this was just so that we could have a conversation. Now, yes, I received that letter, and lucky me, I received phone calls. And the big main concern was one line in particular where the council may, from time to time, change things, and people were upset about that. Now, I can certainly understand it, because if that was the, intent of any council anytime could change it, I would be 100% against it. But the council received that letter in their packet, correct?
The resolution?
The resolution,
Yes.
before that last meeting. I didn't hear one council person raise any questions about the content of the resolution, i.e., the time to time, that this opens it up before, for any council, any time. So, I don't think in a million years that Mr. Restivo's intent was to open it up. I think maybe the process was flawed, understood, but that could have been taken care of without an inflammatory letter going out scaring the over 65 population. I mean, if you want to put some school-age kids in, housing now on a freeze, just have everybody have a heart attack who's on the freeze when they read that letter. So I think you could just move on.
That's the intention. I think Mr. DiPaolo first.
I did. I wanted to know, did we need permission? Did we need a resolution that would possibly give the town council permission to act? Did we need a resolution and ask permission from the state in order to have a discussion and in order to conduct a study?
It turns out we didn't. We believe that we did, since it is state law. We believe we needed to ask their permission to alter it. It turns out we did.
To do a study?
Let's do a study to propose a change.
Okay, I
A
think.
study, we don't need any permission.
I think you put the cart before the horse, and the treasurer has asked the council to look at this. Well, why didn't the council look at this first before they wrote the resolution that potentially gave them the power to make changes, or any future councils to make changes? And again, tonight, I've asked all week for figures. I don't think anybody's been provided figures and numbers. I still haven't heard figures tonight or numbers. I've heard percentages, but I don't know if that 25% is good and maybe 26% is bad. I don't know. What are the numbers? What are the figures? What does that mean? And I don't know that the council has figures that they could provide to us. I don't think so. So in my mind, the study hasn't been done, the figures haven't been brought forth, but a resolution was put forth to possibly make changes, and I don't blame taxpayers for being concerned. I don't know that they were inflamed, but I would think that they had the right to know. I would think that they had the right to know that a resolution was being brought forth that gave the council possible power to make changes in their lives. And the grandfathering was never talked about. I was at that council meeting.
You were at the council meeting. I'm just wondering why you didn't ask any of the questions that evening.
I was at the council meeting. The grandfathering term was never brought up at that meeting. And I'm wondering why we're not concerned about the people that are 60 and 61 and 62 and 63 years old that are looking forward to this and have paid their taxes for 30 years
Actually,
and have
Mr.
looked forward to.
I'm wondering why you're not worried about the 30-year-old with 3 kids that's paying a large amount of additional tax to subsidize a tax freeze that's 40 years old.
Is it being subsidized? I haven't seen the numbers yet, the figures yet.
They present zero
Any-
analysis
any-
to support that
There's
hypothesis.
no study, no
Well,
numbers.
if you saw the budget and were involved in the budget process, you know that it's not a hypothesis. We have a certain levy that has to be raised, that is approved at the financial town meeting. Each year, the folks vote. This is how much has to be raised. Then that amount that has to be raised is distributed across all of the taxpayers. Now, if you have 25% of the taxpayers on the freeze, then 100% of the increase is distributed over 75% of the people. That's a figure. Second statistic, which Kelly said, 25 to 30 additional homes go on the tax freeze every year. Approximately 5 to 7 come off. It's growing every year. Just those 2 things alone.
Did you review any census data, look at that bell curve, understand and do the analysis as to when that's going to taper off? Have you looked beyond this tax year?
The largest age group in town is between the ages of 50 and 65.
It's,
Mr. Lewis?
so it's gonna work.
It's going to grow. And we see it
It's
continuing to
sensitive.
grow. I'm going to recognize in just a moment. We know there's a train coming down the tracks. You know, I know, we all know. If we don't address it, just like the water board, just like the state pension
You can't
fund,
assume what I know.
If you don't-
You can't say to me, you know, Mr. Powell, because you can't assume what I know and I don't know.
from
I'm
hearing
asking-
what you heard this evening, if you don't know, I wonder how you could know. To hear that 30 folks are going on and 5 are coming on every year. To hear that.
That wasn't every year, that was this year. I heard that. That was this year.
That was, how many
35
years has that been going on, Kelly?
35 went on.
It's been going since I've been here.
6
There
years?
are more people go on than go off.
35 went on.
35 this year, 9 coming off, 25 last year, 4 came off. In the 20s the year before, only a handful came off. So there's 3 years right there.
So there's a trend.
There is a trend. The Census Bureau, we do get census information, and as Mr. Stevo said, we have a population that, our greatest population is between 55 and 65 years old. So we can project that it's going to go up. We also get projections from the school department, which goes to what you said. The Foster Gloucester Regional School, their 5-year projection is they're anticipating increases even though the population is going down, because their costs go up, so not increase every year, but they are projecting increases over the next 5 years. The Foster
But
Pain
just think
School,
if the population was going up and the costs were going up, it would be even more.
I agree, but the Pain School, they're not projected to go up next year, but they are projected to go up the year after that, and the year after that, and the year after that. So these numbers are based on projections. So every time, and it is a fact, every time you have a tax increase, if your taxes are frozen, it only affects the people who are currently increasing. So, for example, the Providence Water will only affect the people who are not, their taxes are not frozen. And that problem's been going on for 12 years. So if you look at it that way, there's an issue. When they built the second school, the new school, if your taxes were frozen, for example, it only affected everybody's taxes who were not frozen. So it is there's a financial impact. You don't need an analysis to say if you have less people you're spreading the same pool of money to, then they're going to pay a greater share. That is just a fact.
Mr. Sabathia?
All right. A quick question, maybe. Mr. Restivo, can you, hearing the concerns, okay, and the maybe inflammatory letter, maybe, can you pull out your resolution and rewrite it to say, because you and I had a personal conversation on the phone, and I asked you, which didn't come out of the council meeting, of course you're gonna grandfather the people that are on it, and your answer was yes. That was before the resolution was written. The second thing is, there was another, one, can you pull it out and rewrite it? That's one. The second thing is, there isn't somebody who's addressed here, what about the people that are 60 and have paid their taxes all the time and blah, blah, blah. So maybe you need some kind of, besides eligibility and the rest, you need some kind of adjusting scale, if that's the right word, okay? You know, I like to speak plain English. So plain English is, this was, in the intention of this thing was two things. One, to keep children out of our town, and two, to produce wealth and protect wealth. All right, that was the purpose, okay? And as far as it goes, right now, I think there are 100 houses in the community in transition, all right? And as those houses transition out of the banks at half the value, the other day a house valued at $270 something in town was sold for $130, all right? They're gonna be sold to people who want to move out of the city and move to the country with children. You have now one of the best high schools in the state, makes this community very desirable. You have a rural environment, a good place to raise children. So the idea that you're not going to have 22 to 26 houses built a year as the economy in Rhode Island improves, that's a guess. And in 4 or 5 years, bring the Payne School back up to its number of 400, and the region back up to its increase of students plus inflationary cycle, right? Just that will bankrupt the town. So that, I think Mr. Campbell is correct. The more children, the more the cost. But somehow you cannot pass this burden on, and I'm on the freeze, all right? You cannot have somebody paying my taxes while I'm riding around in 2 Cadillacs. I can't even think of a word how awful it is, all right? And the people that are talking about the problems that were created, Mr. Restivo, Mr. Lewis, Mr. Hawes, I hope you will somehow answer Denise's question, answer the Republicans' party question, rewrite this if it can be done, alleviate everybody's fears, and protect the town for the future. In 1992, I presented this very issue to Bob Boyden's council. And the Republicans ate me alive on one side, and Roger Horse and the Democrats ate me alive on the other side. And I presented all the facts, all the figures, all the studies that were done by statisticians, all right? And I was laughed out of town. And my very proposal was that if you go on the freeze, which is to protect people, to keep them in their houses, all right? At the end, they pay back what we've protected upon the sale of the house. So that is keeping people in their house and protecting their future and helping them live in the community that they love and work and cherish. This is revenue production and wealth protection, as written. Thank you.
Mrs. Rogers?
Just quickly, when I was on the council in 2004, the assessor at that time brought it to our attention. So it goes back before Kelly was here. It goes back that long that it was becoming an issue then. I'm really glad that John at least got it out there, got the discussion going. You need to do something. I had looked at a lot of other towns. I talked to John about this. I had gone through the plans for probably almost all of them. And Foster is the most generous. I don't think, John, you would know this. Is there any other town, city or town that has a 1-year residency requirement? I thought we were the only ones.
Yeah, not that I know of, or certainly not without also having some sort of an income requirement.
Right.
Or an older age or something like that.
I had seen a lot of different ones, so there's a lot that can be done and still have the intent of the freeze met, which was to keep the elderly in their homes, not to protect somebody's inheritance. I think you should form a committee, get the numbers, have Kelly and Patty educate people, the council members or whoever, and get all the facts and get it out there because it really does need to change. It needs to be addressed. But I thank you, John, for bringing it out.
Sorry, I believe you. Go ahead.
Dennis Sterry, I live on South Gillingley. Maybe this tax freeze is obsolete. It's sounding like it's getting obsolete for the town. What if, for an idea, what if it becomes an exemption for 60-year-olds, 65-year-olds, and it's progressive? As you get 70, you get a higher exemption from the tax. As you go up, I mean, there's people that live to be 95 in this town, high 80s, so they've had their tax frozen for 25 and 30 years. So they were paying $4,000 in 1980. They're still paying $4,000, and maybe it'd be better to have a progressive.
Sometimes we buy exemption.
They do.
Sometimes do that. Well, it is our intention to have that conversation and to look at all these different possibilities and gather the statistics, present them, and find a solution that is the best for the town. I mean, what would be the easy thing to do? I'm 55 this year. My wife is a year older than me. 9 years from now, I could go on the freeze. So it might be just easier for me not to deal with people being upset that I raised the issue. Wait till I get on the freeze and hooray for me. But that's not my job. I don't get elected for that here. I get elected to deal with the issues. This is an issue. I'm convinced by the analysis of my treasurer, by the analysis of the tax assessor, by the analysis of previous ones, as people said, was brought up in 1992, this was brought up in 2004. I know for a fact that the town solicitor, at the time this was passed in 1974, Sales Lawn, advised against enacting it. So there's a long history that there are issues with this, and they need to be looked at. And it's a hard thing to do, and it's a hard thing to sit here and take the flak. It would be much easier just to say, the heck with it. I'll be out in 18 months and I'll be on it in 9 years, but somebody needs to step up and have the spine to face the music and do what needs to be done, and that's what I attempt to do. That's where I stand.
May I make a comment, please?
You may.
Thank you. I'd just like to address one comment that was made that no one made. Had any questions, perhaps people should listen to the soundbite of that council meeting, and might hear that there were questions raised.
Sir? Yes.
My name's Kevin Donovan, I live on Plainwoods Road, and I attended the April 9th meeting where the gentleman passed that resolution. I raised concerns about it at that time, specifically the absolutely arbitrary nature of the language of the resolution. Now I'm sitting here listening to you three guys backpedal, because you got a lot of flack from your constituents, saying that it was your intent to do this. You intend to grandfather people. And you have all these intentions. Why do you pass the resolution? If it hasn't been written, it hasn't been said. You might have considered putting that language into the resolution prior to passing it. These are our objectives. These are our intentions. You didn't do that.
We might have put those in, sure. But I do remember answering your question and saying that this resolution was to get the permission from the State House to make the changes. That was
The text of your resolution states that the sitting council will do whatever it wants. Excuse me, Mr. Stephen, that is basically what the text of the resolution states, doesn't it?
The resolution then, as now, as we said, the intention, I know you're specifically asking the intention, but it was to start the conversation. The resolution at this point is meaningless, because we've heard from our representative who said it's not being introduced, it's not being passed at the state level. The words that are written here are never going to become law. They don't control anything that the council is going to do. There's no authority that's granted by this resolution at all.
Yeah.
And it's really just as though, at this point, that it wasn't passed.
And I do think that if you believe that constituent pressure would make you change my opinion, that you have no option ideas on the council side. I'm not easily pressured.
I'm entitled to my opinion. You have very different attitudes tonight than you did in the night at the same time. I frame my attitude based on that. One more thing. There's been zero analysis put forth as far as the numbers of people in this program. People is talking about broad percentages, but I've heard no analysis as to how many people we anticipate coming into this program over the next 10 years. And the other side of the argument as well, assuming this program is eliminated, how many more school children are we going to have coming into the schools as older couples leave the town? You guys need to do some basic arithmetic.
We expect to do that.
Okay. Thank you
And
very
based on
much.
that, just formulate a solution based on facts.
Let's start out by presenting the facts to the town, and I think it'd be much more well-received. Thank you very much.
Mrs. Foster has spoken before, so
Sorry.
come on, I don't know your name.
Jim Dean here from the group. You know, I think the purpose of this is to help the town residents, you know? Why don't you put some sort of a 10-year eligibility thing, you know what I mean? I mean, don't let people move in here at 64 years old. And, I mean, maybe 10 or 15, 20 years, you know? It's going to benefit the town residents, not somebody's going to come in here again with a bunch of kids and wind up overloading the school system again, you know? And I think that's a big problem. That it's not benefit the town residents. If somebody from Providence comes in here, you know, at 63 or 64 years old, has his taxes frozen at 65. I think that you should set up some sort of time limit.
One of the things we do have in mind is a residency requirement like that.
I just think that'd be good. I'm just afraid that the school system is going to get, you know, overburdened with children if older people start moving out and people start moving in, you know. I think you're going to have a large influx of children around. I think that's going to cause another problem, you know. So,
Mrs. Foster?
Yeah, as a member of the school committee, probably get voted out again. You know, I want to explain to everybody here, America's future is in the children we send to school, all right? And I'm going to say, I think I've heard clearly that nobody has any intention to take the people that are on the freeze off. But our future and the taxes we pay to those schools, and the product we produce is gonna be whether America survives or not. Every country in the world has seen Dallas, and every person in the world wants to know why they don't live in the house like they do, like all the people in America do. And in India, China, Yugoslavia, Indonesia, those kids are so much smarter than our kids. And we have to produce the best students in the world. So all this conversation about children, you better hope that they get good educations. Because this will be, in 30 years, a third world country. So no matter what it costs for your schools, if you're getting a good product for what you're paying, which you are getting in this school system, you better be real thankful. Because a lot of places, they're paying for schools that aren't worth crap.
Okay, well, I think we're ready to move on. Perhaps the conversation got off on the wrong foot, but clearly made our intentions known this evening. The numbers will come forward. We will have the conversation together. Anyone, please forward to us your concerns, your ideas, your thoughts, and we'll try to incorporate things in to make this a sustainable ordinance, a sensible ordinance going forward to protect the future of the town. Okay. The first item under new business is a poll petition for Gold Mountain Road. Is there a motion?
Make a motion for discussion, please. I make a motion that we, I can't even say that. I make a motion that we look at the poll petition proposed solely anchor Gold Mine Road for discussion.
You make the motion that we look at it?
Well, I can't say that it's a recommendation of the DPW director because I don't see him recommending it. I just see repetition of what the petition was. So I can't say a recommendation.
A lot of the reasons the poll petitions come to the town is because it's on town property, and they need permission to put a poll on a piece of property. Am I correct, Renee?
Yeah, I'm trying to hear you.
But solely anchor, many times, the anchors for the poles are anchored on private property. So my question is this anchor exceeding the town's property and going onto private property, and do we have the authority to allow an anchor on somebody's private property if that's the case? I'm reading this as it's being the anchor. Sometimes when poles make a corner, they'll anchor them to the ground.
It is, the map is on the back.
Right, and the question is,
It shows the anchor going,
we only own, Gold Mine Road is a two-rod road, which is 33 and a half feet, 17 and a half on each side. The poles are very close to being on the outside edge, within a foot of exceeding our town property. So clearly an anchor goes on the private property. So my question is that.
are they asking the wrong person? Should they be asking the landowner?
Well, I've never seen the question for an anchor come before the council, it's always been poles. I think they just put anchors on, and maybe they should be asking the property owner when they do that.
Can you weigh in on that, Bridget?
Yes, I have to agree with him. The anchor is going to require easement from a private property owner, which is not our duty. It's National Grid. They have an entire legal department that does such a thing.
So then it really does not require any action of the council whatsoever.
If that's what this is asking, it says anchor. Joe, do you have any other information? Is that what they're asking?
It is.
Is that why you didn't recommend? Is that why the wording is just what was on?
As far as the town's concerned, it's not a problem, it's not any problem in the town at all, but it is on private property.
But usually you write for your poll petitions, you say you recommend. You did not say that here, you just reiterated what was on the proposal from.
Right.
Okay.
And again, from the town's perspective, it's fine, but it's private property.
Okay, so
If they need an easement, that's what they need.
so you reviewed it and you don't have any issue with it?
I have no issue.
And the town doesn't have jurisdiction over it.
No, not unless that's like a land trust or anything, that's, I don't know what the property is
On
exactly.
Gold Mine Road, I think.
But I mean, the private property where the anchor is going,
Yeah.
so I mean, it could, I mean, it's not a town.
Okay, so I guess if anyone at this table has a problem with this, then we could make a motion to question it. And if no one has a problem with it, then we don't need to make a motion, we just refer them to the property.
I refer them to the property.
Okay, no action necessary, as we believe that it's on private property. Okay, item B, request for contingency funds for Lesso dump truck. So you have a letter in front of you signed by Public Works Director and the Chief. This is a picture of a vehicle we've been awarded through the federal Lesso program. Military dump truck, it's a $200,000 truck that is, has 4,800 miles on it, and it's located in California. We just need to transport it here for it to become property of the town. And the request here signed by the Public Works Director and the Chief is for us to authorize not to exceed $6,000 from the contingency fund for transportation of this truck cross country.
Does this need to go out to bid?
Joanne?
Well, that's the question. The state purchasing regulations give 5 exceptions to municipal contract policy. This doesn't exactly fit in an emergency, even though it's time sensitive. They do allow for competitive negotiations as opposed to bid if there is only one company or person that can do the job at all, or if there is some other situation like that. I don't know the specifics. Is there anyone in this region, or are you finding there's no one at all here?
No one in the region, no. So far, and I've solicited approximately 6 quotes, and they're all from basically companies out in that general area who can potentially get a load back so they can make money
And you're talking where?
in the California area.
And how did you solicit these?
I went online to a bidding website, and I've also discussed it with some people in the trucking business in town, everyone I knew in town. And no one's really interested in going to California that's not in the trucking business explicitly.
The state, she won't come back. The state only allows 5 exceptions. I'm sure you're all familiar with it. You can also, you would have to put it out to bid. When no one bids, then you can make a file, list everybody you've talked to, try to get the best one. The state purchasing regulations define our purchasing agent for all purposes in our town, because we don't have an ordinance that's different. Kelly, being the treasurer, does the purchasing, does the okays of the checks. So it would be her opinion and she would hold the file on it. I can't say that I can find an exception because it's not an emergency, but how do you know? I mean, do you know it's over 5,000? You don't know?
Well, I just received updated quote 10 minutes ago before this meeting started, and it's exactly $5,000. Exactly. I could possibly get it to go down to $49.95.
There you go.
And then we would avoid the problem. I don't think he'd want to lose it for 5 cents. But it was $6,000 and he had to get back to me because of the time. But we're dealing with one day we have to pick it up. That's it.
Right.
One day, and there are a lot of logistics from here to California.
Sure.
One day.
Well, my thought when we originally talked about this was when you're moving a piece of equipment, because I happen to work for DOT at one point, they're gonna have to get a lot of permits, and they're gonna have to go through a lot of inter and intrastate regulation on
Exactly.
moving something like that. There's
Exactly.
a lot of insurances involved, and there's probably not many people that can do it.
There's a lot of legwork that the company
Yeah,
has
there's
to
a
do
lot
itself.
involved.
That's why the quote was so difficult to get. It started at 48, then it went to 6, and then we're dealing with a broker who deals with private trucking companies. So he's been.
I'm sure there's a small
basically-
niche for something that large and moving. I mean, I go out on a limb and say, you know, if Kelly wants to hold the file, on this particular one, we could just go ahead and do it. I mean, what are you looking at legally? You're looking at someone complaining and saying that you violated the state purchasing regs because they could have bidded to do this.
Right.
And I just don't know that you're gonna have that many people complaining
Would
that
it,
they could have done something.
Well, it sounds like it's not an issue, if you can get the guy to go down $5, it becomes a non-issue.
I'll throw in $50.
would it,
I mean, that's basically what it comes down to, like, they
Just
come
not
down
to
with something like this.
risk it.
I said, this is what I came here, I said, oh, great, 5,000, can you imagine?
Tell them, this is it, this
Would
is how
it-
much you have to do it, can you?
would it be reasonable or appropriate for us to make a motion to allow this, to allow up to $49.99 out of the contingency fund?
Sure.
To let this transport and then let him negotiate with the haulers?
If they insist on larger than that, you tell them, it's gotta go out to bid, and you'll have, you know, and then there is no job for you to do because we won't get it.
Right, exactly, and we might not get the truck that way too. That was the issue, because we only have one day. That's a huge issue. You really don't want to lose a $200,000 piece of equipment.
I mean, you're not supposed to inject your own knowledge, but I think it's fair to say, we all know, when you're moving something like that, between the insurances and the intra and interstate regulations, there's not many companies that can move something. like
Well, I
that.
think what we'd be saying is, we want this piece of equipment, and we really don't have time to go out to bid. So if we can get it for under that price, then
If you get it under that price, it doesn't matter.
Right.
I don't think there's an auditor in the world who would write me up for that.
That's what I mean. I mean, what it would be is someone, legally, someone would have to file a complaint against you because they're going to be able to move it. And you didn't put it out to bid.
All right, to move along, I'll make a motion that will allow the Lesko fund not to exceed $49.99. I'm pretty sure the guy will drop $5.
I think so.
I mean, you got the broker involved in that also.
seconded by Mr. Hawes, discussion?
Contingency.
Make sure you don't put it
From contingency.
We don't have a list.
Well, so much.
Until next year.
All right,
I
from the
didn't
contingency.
get that part of the
He
conversation.
made the motion to the last fund, we don't have a list.
We don't have a list of any July,
Right.
but
So
continue.
from the contingency, yeah.
So he made the contingency,
I second.
you seconded the contingency. Okay, discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion carries unanimously.
Make sure I get that contract because you don't want them going halfway and calling up for more money.
Oh, they get a car
Yeah,
accident.
change
I
the
want to hear it.
No, maybe it's not, maybe the plug's not working.
Okay,
It's
no
run out of
problem
battery
with
power.
the, problem with the recorders.